of Script Magazine. This is our last session titled The Screenwriter's Landscape in 2022. This is supposed to be a panel discussion, but unfortunately our other panelist, Jen and Millie, had a conflict, so it'll be just myself and the wonderful Shaye Ogbonna joining us. And I think this is going to be a really fun conversation talking about being a writer in 2022. Then I'm going to introduce you to my brother in arms in writing from AFI days, Shaye Ogbonna, who is just actually came off of premiering his movie God's Country at Sundance Film Festival this year, which a beautiful movie, a great adaptation that he did with Julian Higgins. He's been working in TV as of recently, currently on the upcoming HBO Max show Penguin. Previous to that, he made a indie feature, Low Life, again, which was genre film wise just mind blowing, so good. Those guys are just super talented, and they're all off doing their own thing too. But before I read more of his bio, let's just talk to the guy. We have him here. So Shaye, welcome to my room.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I know you're working right now. So we'll try to make it pretty simple for you, so you're not overthinking, using too much brain power. But just jumping in, talking about the landscape of writing, especially right now, it's so different from what we were taught, 10 plus years ago, and getting into the industry. And just navigating that as a writer and getting work and getting your voice out there as a writer. But before we get into that, I'd love to learn just more about your writing journey, from you starting out, coming out to LA, to getting to the room that you're literally in right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in terms of the LA journey, yeah, it started in 2009. As you well know, when I came to AFI, the American Film Institute. And when I came to AFI, I always say this, is I had a plan, and my plan was to find my tribe. And that's the thing about the American Film Institute, as you well know, is that it's a conservatory model. So the way it works is they select a certain amount of screenwriters, 28 screenwriters, 28 directors, 28 producers, and cinematographers. And we're all kind of we all work together, essentially, specifically the first year. We make, 3 short films, and we're constantly grouping up. So you kind of dropped into this crucible of creative competition, I guess, for lack of a better word, where you're just trying to find people that you vibe with, that you connect with, that have similar sensibilities with. Everybody's from all over the world, and we're all just kind of dropped in this, in Los Feliz, and trying to figure it out. And I knew in that environment, I felt like that. And that's why I didn't apply to USC, any other program, because I thought that environment fit my specific plan, which, like I said, was to find a group of people that I could connect with and kind of build with and create with. Because I remember watching documentaries and stories about how back in the 70s and 80s, Spielberg and Scorsese and Coppola and De Palma and all those cats, that film, the film school class, all those cats were hanging around with each other and making stuff. There's the stories of Spielberg being on the set of Scarface, operating B camera, which is insane. You know what I mean? I'm a big fan. I came up in that environment, that type of collective communal environment of creativity. That's something that always spoke to me personally and professionally. So when I came to AFI, I was definitely looking to find those people. And so when I was there, I was always looking at the people. I was kind of working with the same people all the time. I found people I vibe with, and immediately we were already first, second year kind of plotting out, ideas and ways to continuously work together. And at the time for us, it was digitally, which is still the same thing, which is working, doing sketches and web series and kind of these and shorts, and just kind of working that, the Funny or Die or digital studio kind of angle. Because it was at the time, it was right on the beginning wave of this content, demand. And so that's kind of how so like I said, I ended up connecting with 2-3 other writers. a director, and we kind of formed this collective, and we were making stuff. And then we kind of always working with the same cinematographers because, like I said, the way the conservatory model works, always work kind of the same like one or two editors, same one or two production designers. And so like the cool things, we really like picking from like, you know, each discipline and just like always constantly working together. And it kind of prepared us when we did Low Life. So when we did Low Life in 2015 or 16, I believe, was when we shot it. We had made quite a bit of content from like sketches and web series. So we kind of, it was always kind of like practice for us. And so what we did was we pulled all our resources together like in 2016, and Ryan Prowse, who's the director in that group, he was just like, I got an idea for a movie. And it basically is essentially a combination of all these different sketches that we did. And we were just like literally streamlining and making it into a story. And we ended up shooting Low Life at that time. And it literally was because we had that kind of tribe mentality. We all kind of pulled together our resources. If you didn't have money, there was something else you could bring to the table. There were like at the times the DP we were working with, that we had worked with on a lot of our projects. He had been shooting commercials, so he had built up favors to where he could get us like a pretty decent camera package. So ultimately, we made a movie that was like literally for pennies. It looked like it was like $1 million. And so that was it. That was kind of like the journey. It was literally AFI, find this tribe, work with this tribe, cultivate our skills, continuously work, even making nothing, little, projects for like no money. And ultimately, Low Life was kind of like the big game. And we all just kind of came together and what, for lack of a better word, balled out and made something that we were all proud of.
Yeah. And it's, everyone has their unique path in getting to this point. And, as screenwriters, it's usually a very lonely world for us. But I feel like in this day and age, it's really important to find that tribe or to network to find that tribe. And as screenwriters now, once you've learned this craft and you've found your voice through that craft and doing it, it's important to understand the other departments and what they're bringing to the table, because you might have to do some of that. And for you, you're also a multi hyphenate. You've done the acting and producing, and I'm assuming at some point you'll be directing, So, the importance for you to get into a room now, because now you're dabbling in TV, having that knowledge, has that, I would assume it's helped you kind of step up that game of just the business side of it, of understanding what a producer is going to do in this role and as a writer, especially what's going on the page and working collaboratively with other creatives.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, that collective mentality, that like working the way we work, it helped me to kind of take a non-traditional path to the room. Generally, a lot of people take the assistant route, which is 100% fine. I kind of realized early on it wasn't my route. And so the way I was able to kind of like take this route, that I was able to like get into a room without being an assistant, was literally through, like I said, this, through this exercise of like making stuff, being able to like, whether I was acting in it, producing, holding a boom mic, whatever you want to call it. All of those different tasks kind of helped me, for lack of a word, I don't want to say jump the line, but kind of go that non-traditional route. Because I remember the first job I got, it was literally because like they said, hey man, you kind of have set experience, you have producing experience, and you also understand how a writer's room works, just because you work with a collective of writers. It wasn't just you writing, like we had a writer's room kind of mentality. So like it helped me to literally like take that non-traditional route and to get in a writer's room without like having like being an assistant or being a writer's PA or more one of those more traditional routes into the room. So yeah, and I think that's helpful, especially these days. Now, I mean, like writers are now becoming like with the advent of how much content is out there, they're becoming like creators and multi-hyphenate. So I always say to people, to writers, the best advice I can give you is to like not only write, you can get in a room and write as much material as you want, but you need to kind of get out. I always say even act. Take an acting class, like just taking an acting class, and I can give specific examples of how that helped me. But taking an acting class or engaging in the craft will absolutely be beneficial to you as a writer, because sometimes we get just so locked into the page and scene work, and there's so many other elements that obviously are a huge part of the process of, whether it's making TV or making movies, especially in TV, where you kind of need to be a multi-hyphenate in order to be successful, specifically in the networks. So yeah, it was definitely like hugely like a benefit to me, like that path and that plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, now, we have all these streamers, right? We have Netflix, HBO Max, we have, you name it, every studio seems to have one. As a writer and a writer producer navigating that, and pitching to these streamers, have you had experience pitching to like a Netflix or somewhere and just seeing like what they're looking for you as a writer? Because I know back in the day for us, it was like you had a one sheet, good luck, hopefully you get this sold. But now they're looking for like lookbooks and like concept art from screenwriters. Can you kind of talk about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've had experience. I sold a show last year, which is kind of a passion project for me. And I had pitched it to, it's been announced, but I pitched it to Showtime, pitched it to a major, cable network. And it all started, for me, and I think there needs to be more emphasis on this at the school level. I think the cool thing about AFI is that we kind of always pitching, even from day one, because even like that first year, we kind of had to like pitch ideas in like smaller rooms. And I remember we had to pitch like our cycle one in front of like the whole like school, which is super nerve wracking. It was always kind of a constant pitching environment. You were always either pitching one-on-one to somebody, or pitching to a group, or pitching to your workshop group, in your discipline. You always got a pitching. And then, we had like a pitch class that was specifically like kind of like this huge, it was kind of like the speed dating style pitching thing that we did like right after second year. And that ultimately kind of like, because pitching is not my thing. It's still like I'm getting better at it and I'm more comfortable with it. But I think for most writers, our skill set is antithetical to pitching. And so you have to learn to really get out there and be able to kind of like verbalize your story. And of course, it makes you a better writer. So yeah, in this day and age, and even in the writer's room, that's what you're doing a lot. So, I'm hoping to answer your question, but yeah, like pitching is such a huge part of what we do. I feel like these days I pitch more than I write. As a matter of fact, I know I pitch more than I write, which is insane. And like another skill, I think you mentioned this, like lookbooks, like I've like become this like master pitch deck creator. I don't know where it came from. I've always been into like pictures and images. I never was like specifically a writer starting out. Like when I was an undergrad, I wanted to do it all. I wanted to be a writer, director, producer. So like I've always kind of like dabbled. And so like lately I'm like creating my own decks and people are, pretty impressed with it. So that's also a huge element of it, to be able to like, not only like, you can't just be literally writing scenes. Once you really start working, you'll be surprised at how that becomes a smaller percentage of your job is actually writing scenes. Like a huge part of your job becomes pitching. It becomes like either creating decks on your own or working with someone to do that if that's not your skill set. But it's all these other tasks that you have to learn and master that are part of the job. Besides, like I said, when it comes to actually writing scenes, that's become such a like smaller part of my job. It's still the best part of my job, and I love it. I love when I finally get in there and get on that page. Sometimes it's frightening as well, but like like I said, yeah, once you really start working, like you start doing a lot of stuff besides just actually, writing scenes.
Yeah, it's like the tables flip. Like the reward is actually writing after you've done all that work, which is so interesting. And in terms of finding representation, I know a lot of people on this session right now either starting out or interested or just don't know about it, but just like the power of networking, right? And then finding that representation and then having them kind of foster your journey into becoming that professional writer. What was that like for you? And finally locking down a manager, then an agent, and like what they do for you at the same time and differently for you in your career?
Well, I'll first start off with this. I think when you first get out of school or wherever you come from, when you get to LA or you first start out, everybody's clamoring for representation. And I 100% get that. But just be advised or warned or whatever you want to call it, bad representation is way worse than no representation. I know that because I had bad representation. I literally signed with a manager right out of AFI, and it was like through like that Pitch Fest thing we did. And I got hip pocketed, like do this thing where they're like, you're gonna be my, which is, I mean, I'm wrong with that, but I got hip pocketed by this manager, and I kind of like got just guided. She guided me to a place that she thought was best for her, not ultimately for me. In my path, she didn't take the time to like get to know me as a creative and like the type of creative I am as Shaye Ogbonna, and not just a name on a page. And so I spent about like 4 years, like my career, I always like to say, started about 4 years later than it probably should have, because I was like giving bad advice. So don't, just because somebody reaches out to you through whatever avenue they reach out to you through, like doesn't necessarily mean that you need to, that they're the representation for you. Vet that representation, research, ask people, ask them who's like the thing that should have let me know that she wasn't the one for me was that she used to manage Sam Ishmael, who is the guy that created Mr. Robot and is like a force. And I think he went to AFI. And I think that was kind of their thing. They were like basically mining like AFI and other places for talent. And she was like, I didn't know how to like represent him. And I should have like, that should have been like the red flag right there. Was like, you didn't know how to represent Sam Ishmael.
Yeah.
I'm guessing, and I realize it's because this dude, like, if you know Sam Ishmael's work, he's kind of like a trailblazer. And you didn't know how to like, that should have told me right there, like, nah, you ain't for me. But of course, it took like a couple more years to realize it. So that being said, like, be very, like, just because somebody wants you does not mean, it's better to have no representation than bad representation. And if you do your job and you are talented and you're networking and you're getting yourself out there, good representation will find you. Yes, I'm sure there's some legwork involved in it, but you know, anything worth that, this career path, it's a tough career path. So you got to be ready to, like, you know, boots on the ground and kind of work. But in terms of where I am now, I have a manager, I have agents, I have lawyers, I have all that stuff. And what happens, they've been cool. I was a lot more savvy in my selection process. And I found the people that were right for me, and specifically with my managers who I just signed with, I think early last year. It's been like, ever since I signed with these managers, it's been the polar opposite of my experience with my first manager. And so, like, yes, good representation is important. Representation just in name I think we put way too much, not pressure, but like, I think we put much emphasis on that. And I think it's just like, you don't, because like I said, you could literally waste a few years of your life with bad representation, especially if you're like a novice. A lot of us are coming in, we're just creatives. We don't know the business side of it, which is why they become a necessary evil, for lack of a better word. So I just say my whole thing is just be careful. Just somebody wants you, that doesn't mean you need to sign with them.
Yeah, 100%. And also just knowing like how you realize, you know, unfortunately it took 4 years, but to know that they're not right for you, because at the end of the day, your manager, your representation is there to work for you in your favor and managing your skill set. So yeah, be forewarned. Don't just jump at the first person that wants to sign you. Make sure you vet them as well and see what their game plan is for you as well, because that's so important. And then in terms of agents and lawyers and having that protection as well, in terms when it comes to contracts or agreements to work for hires, whatever it is you're doing, or a writing assignment. You know, we had a session earlier today, we were talking about the mindset of like rewrites, and someone had a question about, you know, what goes into that contract of, you know, what is that timeline for a rewrite? Are you getting paid for it? Does it, you know, what does it look like? Do you have experience on your end doing that kind of stuff of getting hired for a project and going through your rewrites and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I mean, when I tell you I'm slammed, Sadie, I'm slammed. Like literally, I am doing a rewrite I'm doing a rewrite assignment. I have to rewrite my pilot that I sold, so that's technically a rewrite. But I think to answer your question more specifically, I actually have what was called an open writing assignment, OWA, that I landed earlier this year. It was just a while to get it, but it finally went through. And according to the contract, I was supposed to get. Man, I hope he ain't listening right now. He's not. But he's got a big deal. I think it was like I looked at the contract. It's supposed to be like 6 weeks, and to be frank, I haven't technically started on it yet, and it's been like I think since I signed the contract, it's been like 4, but I haven't heard anything from the studio. So generally, I always keep it like I always keep it 100, as the kids like to say. Yeah. So like I know me personally, like the contract says I had like 6. You have 6 weeks to do and I think that's the general. I think union language is that when you do a rewrite, and I hope I'm answering your question. There's it's like you have like a 6-week period to get that rewrite done. And for me, and in terms of the payment, you get half up front, and then when you turn it in, you get the other half. And that's what's happened with me. Like I've gotten the first half of the payment, and and according to the contract that I read, it was like a 6-week period. I haven't heard anything. I don't think they're in a hurry for this one. I think I've reached a place where people like trust me and trust my process. And people know that I'm like super busy right now. But yeah, I have had experiences that I'm literally dealing with that right now. I'm doing a rewrite, and I got to jump on it. I got to get that done.
Writers do best, procrastinate, right? Yeah, that's when all the good stuff comes out, though.
Preach.
But but I mean, I'm not saying everyone should do it, but do what works for you. And then coming off of God's Country, which premiered at Sundance this year, and it's playing, and I think you just said it just premiered somewhere else in Boston, right? In front of an audience. Working with a writer-director in that collaboration and getting to that point of getting it to a film festival like Sundance, and what that does for you as a writer and your credibility. But first, I want to kind of jump into just that writing collaboration with Julian Higgins, who's the director of God's Country, and that adaptation and writing together and then getting it made. And that mindset of you having that networking mindset and that tribal mindset of your community. Julian's also a fellow AFIer. So just a little bit about that.
Started with Low Life. So again, it all goes back to the origin, which is, like I said, go to AFI, come with the plan, enact the plan. Plan works out. So I met Julian at a screening of Low Life, and Julian and Ryan, who is the director I mentioned, and my friend that's in the collective with us and that directed Low Life. I mean, Julian are friends. I knew of Julian because he was a year above us, and I was really, I think of that year, Julian and particularly Julian and Ari Aster were like the directors of that year that people were really like, looking at and being like, these two are, talented and can be, and they have, they are. We both noticed. Ari's a whole other conversation, but like they have the potential to be pretty, significant, directors in this industry, and it worked out. And Julian, I just always impressed with his work. I remember seeing his short Thief and being like, I was like, I want to work with this dude. First, I'm like, I would pay to see his movies, number one, which you can't say for everyone. And I was like, I want to work with this guy. And then like 6-7 years later, I meet him at the Low Life screening. And we just got to talking. At the time, it was on the heels of the election. And we were just like, it was just a conversation of just like, how can we make our art our activism? That was the way it started. And then that conversation led to more conversations. And we just realized that, we have similar sensibilities. We have similar like ideologies in terms of storytelling. And we just like, let's figure something out and work together. And then Julian had already, I'm kind of a little bit telling the story of God's Country, but Julian did God's Country as a short film, which is based on the original material called Winter Light. He did it as a straight up adaptation short. He had the idea of redoing it or further adapting it as a feature, expanding it. And he had the brilliant idea of changing the race and gender of the main character from Winter Light, who was an older white man in Winter Light, and he wanted to change the character to a middle-aged Black woman. in God's Country, which we ultimately, that was the title we changed it to. And it obviously changed the chemistry of the film. It changed, like, it opened things up, and it made it a more, I don't want to say interesting, but it just made it, it just it gave us an opportunity to explore other themes and dynamics that the first film couldn't do, just by changing that one thing. So long story short, like, Julian, originally I was just the writer on it, and Julian was going to direct it. And I think that was the way he generally liked to work. I think he can write. He's actually a very talented writer, but he really respects the writing process, and he wants to empower people. And he's like, yo, you write it, I'm going to direct it. But the thing was, me and Julian were always working together on the story. Like, we were literally like breaking story together at his house constantly. And we were just like, we immediately became this hive mind. And then when I would go off and write, it wasn't translating. And sometimes as a writer, as a creative period, you got to learn to, like, I'm a big fan of, like, I pray at the temple of story's king. I leave my ego at the door. I think, especially when you're working in a group setting or collective, you got to, like, think like that. And so I was like, it just wasn't translating. I just told Julian, I don't know if it was his idea or my idea. I was like, I think he was scared to ask, but he was like, maybe we should co-write this. And I was like, bruh, we've been co-writing it. I just have been going off alone and writing the script, which doesn't make any sense. We've literally been co-writing. We need to take that same energy and put it on the actual writing of the screenplay. Once we did that, to the moon, it just took off. And it became the document and ultimately the film that it is today. So, I mean, obviously there's different collaborations. I've collaborated with 2 directors, in terms of features, and one was more of a group collaboration, which in terms of Low Life, because it was 4 to 5 writers on that, and then this is just me and Julian. And was more of a room, obviously, and one was more of a straight up partnership. And in that case, it was just us realizing that as we were actually working as one brain. And once we realized we just, like, in terms of the actual writing of the screenplay, I think we started out, he'd write a section, I'd write a section, and then we come together and rewrite. And then ultimately, like, the rewriting process was, I think a lot of people hate the rewriting process, or it's not their favorite part of the screenwriting process. And me and Julian, that's what we go to play. Like, we would literally, and the thing we would do a lot is we would have these conversations. We would, like, talk for hours and change, like, 3 lines. But those conversations were part of the writing process. And they were like, and then once Tandy came on, Tandy became like the third brain in that writing process. And not even just Tandy, like Andrew Wheeler, who's our DP, like, everyone kind of, like, we all had a respect for each other's crafts. And we all, like, seriously, ego out the way. Like, there were times I was on set and, I'd be right there with Andrew, like, at the lens, it was just like, it was a beautiful communal, that's the right word, style of filmmaking in Montana that I will always remember. And I'll always, like, nothing will ever be like that again.
Yeah. It's like the perfect storm of just the creativity. Like, I wish, like, all of us here who are participating in this, just, like, having that moment of just everyone's on the same page, from your actors to, your DP. That's so cool. And, you said something earlier about what the project you just sold, but your passion project and writing things that resonate with you or that you're passionate about. And I think that's the stuff that gets noticed. And I feel like a lot of writers who are starting out, they're kind of chasing what's the trend right now. And, before it was vampires, and then it was superheroes and werewolves, whatever it is. But the stuff that gets you noticed is the stuff that you love. So I don't know if you're able to talk about your project that you sold to Showtime, but I know vaguely of what it is. And as soon as I saw that in the trades, I was like, oh, that's Shaye. 100%. But yeah, the importance of doing that and, writing what you guys wrote for God's Country, that those themes, and again, your activism and your art. Can you just kind of talk about that and how that's helped you kind of just in finding your voice and then just getting to where you are career-wise?
Yeah, I mean, the people that I'm influenced by, I think follow that, some more strictly than others. People like, Sorkin or, James L. Brooks, Spike, people like whoever you want to, like, throw, like, I've always kind of, like, and just speaking of what you're talking about, just quickly, like, when they hire, like, they're hiring you. They're not just hiring that's why, like, that whole trend chasing thing, it doesn't work. It may work out for a little bit, but when it's like when you really, you know, start getting into this business, they're hiring you. It's you they want. So like write what you know, write what you're passionate about, and that becomes, you become the brand. That's what I'm learning. Like if you really are do your job and are, like I said, you know, writing what you know and writing what you passionate, you become the brand. And so for me specifically, like, and I'm a little bit versatile too. Like obviously I did God's Country, but then the show I sold is like it's a modern contemporary tale of like the sneaker industry, like the cutthroat world of the sneaker industry. And it's kind of like Billions, you know, meets you know, kind of like a very like kind of I don't know why I'm blanking on this right now, but it's kind of like Billions meets like, you know, Entourage or one of those that kind of like, you know, really like propulsive show about an industry. You know, that's it's called Jumpman, and that's what the show is about. And it's about a sneaker exec. It's literally about a sneaker exec in the rapidly changing cutthroat sneaker industry that has to decide what's more important, you know, being successful in business, reaching like certain heights, or like cultural relevance. And it's specifically in the sneaker world is this like confluence of capitalism and kind of more egalitarian, you know, thinking. Like you can literally see like a billionaire wearing the same shoes as like, you know, a kid, you know, from South LA. And they're all like after the same. And I feel like that's what makes the culture. Like, I think when people like think of sneakers, especially in LA, they think of like Fairfax and they see all these people lined up and they're like, man, those people look dumb. What are they doing? But there's a whole other side of it. There's a very interesting, very cultural side of it. It has a lot to do with politics, and cultural awareness and the intersectionality, really, you know. So like those are the themes that I'm very much interested in exploring. And one of the reasons I became a writer was to center people that you don't normally see centered in mainstream work. Not just like, you know, it doesn't have to be political. Honestly, that is political in itself. Like I'm a big fan of genre storytelling. I grew up watching, you know, the blockbuster movies, the Jurassic Park, the Ferris Bueller's Days, all those movies. I just wanted to see myself in it, or people that, you know, you know, that I grew up with or whatever. So like for me, I was just like, oh, I just want to tell those same stories. I just want to tell them from a different perspective. So that's kind of like, that's literally like what, even though this sneaker, you know, Jumpman, the sneaker show, and God's Country are literally two totally different styles or genres or, you know, types of work, like they all have like this. I think the one thing that combines them is like this idea of like, again, you know, they feel like mainstream. They feel like, oh, this is universal. They're dealing with universal things, but it's coming from a perspective that you don't normally like get a chance to see.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up the fact of being a writer now is your brand. You're selling yourself and what your capabilities are, which is so important now, because it was like that, you know, starting out, you know, once movies start coming around, but it's more so now, especially with social media and all the streaming stuff. I'm curious, because you're so deep into this world right now, and seeing like Netflix kind of, I mean, a lot of networks do it too, but where they're just canceling shows now and they're firing people, and, you know, just kind of like this new renaissance happening again with TV and movies. You know, where's our place as screenwriters? Like, you know, is this a good time for us to keep creating and pushing out more, or kind of take a step back and be like, okay, let's see what's happening here in the shakedown? Like, are theaters coming back? Is streaming going to win again? You know, what is that like for us?
I mean, the funny thing is I literally just read that article about Netflix 2 days ago. And for me, like, I don't really like keep up with what's going on from a trade, you know, the trades and all of that. I'm usually laser focused on what I'm doing. Because like the end of the day, this thing works like a lot of markets and industries. There's bubbles, you know what I mean? And they burst and then they come back. There's strikes. They clamor for a certain material and then they say no. And I used to kind of be influenced by that. And I just like decided, I think it came from like working with the collective, because the collective, we have this mentality of always like, whatever we do, we always tell people, if you want to become partners with us, think of this like it's a train and it's leaving the station. It's going to leave whether you're on it or not. get on or get out of the way because you might get ran over. So and I think that mentality really intrigued Julian, and then Julian brought that energy to God's Country. And I think the reason God's Country was able to get made, God's Country got made through a pandemic. You know what I mean? And I think we were able to survive that pandemic and make the movie we always wanted to make, because we always had a singular mentality of like, trains leaving, you don't want to get out the way. And I think you have to have that mentality with your career of just like, again, like I said, because you ultimately become the brand. And then when you become the brand, all of that outside noise is just like, that's just like the industry. That's all of the execs trying to like, rationalize their jobs or their positions. These are all power plays and power grabs. And that ain't me. I'm a creative. You know what I mean? I write and do my thing. And then I go home and play with my kid. So for me, I just kind of like, I block out all that noise. I might read about it, but I try not to get too into it. I think, and to answer your question, just keep doing you and keep creating, because that's the way this thing is always going to have ebb and flows to it. And you just got to like, just keep laser focused and keep doing your thing. And if you do that, you kind of like become not necessarily immune to it, but it just doesn't, you just keep, I mean, people like, I'm still working through a pandemic. I'm still working through all of this stuff. I obviously not working with Netflix. I don't have anything with them, but if I did, we see what would happen with that. And we just adjust. And I think that's also what good representation helps as well, because good representation will also block out all that noise for you, and give you the opportunity to just do what you love, which is to create. So, I mean, again, I hope I answered your question, but for me, that's kind of like the way I always move. I stay laser focused, and I tend to like not, I feel like I need to be better at kind of knowing what's going on, you know, from an industry perspective, but I also think it helps to have like that willful ignorance of not knowing. So
yeah, and not be influenced by it, right? Yeah, and don't let it weigh you down. But we're getting close to the end of this, but I want to open up for Q&A from the audience. So if anyone has any questions, like type those in, and as you're typing those in, I'll just keep chatting with you, Shaye. In terms of development, because I know you've done now features now and a lot of TV now, you know, what is that process like as a writer, you know, in terms of just talking about just screenwriting and developing, say, like for the, you know, the your new open writing assignment, and like working through that, you know, are there influences, like other creative influences coming into play? Are you in talks with like there's a director attached, you know, like how is that process like for you? Are you kind of like a lone wolf going through that process yourself?
Well, I mean, for the writing assignment, there's no director attached. There's a big time A-list producer, like EP attached, who I deal with, who I've dealt with like directly, and you know, he's been great. And that's kind of like that's literally, and I've only met with the studio like once, and that's been pretty much it. So it's literally like, I've been lucky in that the two development projects I have, which is this feature assignment, and then then I have like the show I saw, but I'm actually developing a series with same major executive producer, and I think he's just, I've been lucky that the partners that I've been working with are great and trust my process and trust me, and kind of they'll give me notes and kind of let me do my thing. And it's been great because it's given me the freedom. I don't like being like stifled as a writer, having all these people in my head. It slows me down, and I don't produce the quality of work that people are accustomed to from me. So I think, maybe I've just gotten to a place where people realize that, and they just kind of like, they trust me enough to kind of leave me alone and let me do my thing. But also, like I said, like because of that, because I'm so slim right now, and if I'm not, sometimes I need people on me, because then I'm just like, I get kind of like bogged, kind of like, you know, lost in the forest for the not seeing the trees, whatever that statement is, that you know, thing. So yeah, but like like in both instances, it's been great. Like I've been lucky in that the creative partners have been great. They've kind of let me alone to kind of like, you know, figure it out, and they'll just check in with me, and I don't feel any pressure to like, you know, hit any deadlines or anything like that. And I don't have a million people in my ear. I'm not like having these like, you know, these network calls that you hear about, you know, these notes calls where people are like, oh my God, I haven't had that yet. I'm sure it's coming. But so far it's been great. And even like specifically with the sneaker show, I've had a notes call with the network. And it was great. It literally was just like, we love it. I think there's some things that we can do to make it, to make it better. And, you take it or leave it. And so they've been great. I was like coming in thinking like trying to answer. And they were like, no. This is just that suggestions. Go do your thing. Well, okay, cool. So I've been very lucky. And that isn't the same for everyone. Like I said, I've just been very fortunate. And maybe it is a function of what I've done. I don't know.
Yeah. Your work speaks for itself. And then again, having good representation. I'm curious, with the last 2 years, being in pandemic and COVID and lockdown and all that, and working in rooms or just even shooting your movie, just kind of like, do you feel like this trend will continue, and just in terms of like this kind of interaction, Zoom calls, Zoom rooms, and just, I know you're back into your room physically now, but do you think there's now more of like I want to say like maybe like an appreciation of just like letting the creatives be creative, and we'll come together when needed, and this will go through the next couple years of letting people work on their own, work from home, and then come together when needed, and then hopefully go and shoot something and make something or a TV show out of that work?
I hope so. I mean, yeah, I may not be the best authority to talk to on this, but like, I really hope, I feel like it will be, I think it's conducive to good work, specifically from a creative standpoint. But the thing about our industry is that a lot of the gatekeepers are non-creatives. And so because of that, they just like, it's always like, how do I implement control or power over the work? And a lot of ways of doing that is by micromanaging. It is by getting people in physical rooms and just like constantly like over your shoulder style, managerial style, or whatever you want to call it. And it's unfortunate. I don't think it's conducive to like, quality work, but that's kind of the way the machine, works sometimes. Like I said, in my experience, I've been lucky that I haven't really dealt with that very much. I hope that the thing that comes out of the pandemic is like, people do realize like, yeah, man, like maybe we should, like work-life balance is better when you're doing, and work-life balance is very important as a creative. Like for me personally, especially, like I gotta have a good life balance in order to like do my best work. If I don't, my work, at least for my standards, it becomes like derivative, and it's not working at the level that I need it to work at for me. And some people are like have less standards, lower standards than me, and that's fine. But just for me, it's just like, because I'm doing what I love and it's so connected to who I am as a person, it's got to be at a certain level. And so like for me, yeah, work-life balance becomes very important. And that's what the Zoom rooms become, the Zooms rooms. And I think it becomes helpful. Like for me, I feel like way more exhausted since I've been back in a physical room than I did when I was not in a physical room, just because of the act of getting in my car and drive. I know it sounds like crazy, what I mean? Like, it's like, what, man? People are actually out here like, laying bricks, you know what I mean? And I'm up here talking about, man, I got to get in my car and drive down Santa Monica. And, but it does, we use a lot of mental energy up here. And like, a lot of that gets kind of like depleted when you're like having to like drive and having to also be at super, super present in a physical room versus, in a Zoom room where you feel like a little more relaxed. And so I hope, yes, to answer your question, I hope that we do. I felt like, I don't know much about like the Netflix thing, but it seems like what they were doing was they were really trying to empower, at least for a minute, they were really trying to empower creatives. And then like there became a bit of a tug of war there. And I'm sure we may see this as maybe a trend. And then, maybe people will see that it don't work, and then we'll get back to, some hybrid of what we were doing before.
Right. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. As we're running out of time here, and again, I invite anyone to ask any questions. Here we go.
Yeah, don't be scared.
We got a few in here. Let's see. I was waiting for you, James. All right. All right. So if the market might change, as you mentioned, by the time I end up finishing writing a feature, for example, should I also think about making it into a streaming series of my feature, just in case the industry's demand has changed, so that I don't miss my shot to sell my spec script?
That is such a loaded question. I could just say from experience, I don't think it would hurt. Like I started out not really wanting to do TV, and then like my second year at AFI, I had this amazing I had amazing TV class. I don't think you were. I don't think you were in my section, Sid. I think you were like in Marta Kaufman's section.
Yeah.
I had an amazing. Yeah, I was in Munich, and it just kind of, and it was obviously doing the golden age of TV. So I was just like, hold up, TV is now doing cinematic storytelling, adult drama stuff that we were no longer seeing in features, and now they're being done in TV. Oh, this is great. Oh, it's fun. And then I was like, I want to do TV now, and it was the smartest decision I've ever made. So to answer your question, like the one good thing that trash manager did for me was she is the person that advised me to take a feature script that I had written, a Western, and to change that into a series. And that thing, to this day, I don't think people realize I wrote that like in 2010 or whatever. Oh no, I did the series version like probably 2012. But still, it's been like 10 years. That is still a sample that people still read today, thinking I wrote that like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, oh no, man, it's great, it's great. But like, yeah. So to answer your question, yes. But just like make sure that it actually, like, I understand you want to follow those trends, but I think at the same time, the creative North Star always has to like be your guide. So if it works as a series, you think it could be interesting as a series, then yes, I think you can think of it and look at it as a series. I'm a big believer in quality over quantity. So you could go and write another spec feature script, right? That's cool. You can write 5 more, but you could get more mileage out of taking that feature sample that you're doing that you're probably super passionate about. And if it could work as a series, yeah, change it to, write a pilot off of it. And and then that thing can ultimately get you work, which mine did. And and you might end up making it as a series, which could be ultimately the place for it. So I'm not a big fan of following market trends, but I don't think it hurts just so you can have another kind of bullet in the chamber, for lack of a better word, of a project, of an idea. So if it's a really good idea, I think it could be beneficial for you to like look at it as a series. But like I said, just be wary of following marketing trends. Like if you're writing a vampire script and they're not taking vampire scripts, that don't mean you need to not do that, because it's just like, if it's a good script, people will definitely still be interested in it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I know it's a whole other conversation, but like IPs and creating your own IPs and having that, your comic book, your graphic novel, and the series, and like having all ready to go. It's kind of like what that guy, I can't remember the writer's name, but the Hotel Transylvania guy did that.
Oh,
I
for
think
real?
he did like the children's book, and then he did the movie, and I think he even has like rights to his own board game. Like it's crazy, but do what you got to do to get yourself out there. Stephanie, okay, she says, thank you for sharing your professional writing industry experiences. I take your point about getting on board. Don't miss the train or good opportunities. At the beginning of a script writing career, it's all a bit daunting, though. How did you keep up your writing creativity without letting it get overpowered by the confusion of the industry? What motivated you to keep writing and moving forward despite the first 4 years with no useful guidance?
I mean, I wish I had a more like concise, verbose answer for you. But for me, it's just like, I didn't have a backup plan. Like, this is like what I wanted to do. Like, it's just, I think for me, like I always had like a mentality. I'd rather take a shitty day job than like take a really, really, really good corporate job. You know what I mean? Because I just wanted to always, my mentality was, I'm a writer, who happens to bag groceries or something like that. You know what I mean? That makes sense. Like my mentality was always, I'm a writer first. I'm a creative first. And I think I said this in like a Q&A about God's Country, or when I was doing God's Country, like we were doing Low Life. I was at the brokest in my life. But I was just happy because I was like, we're doing stuff, we're making stuff, we're doing stuff. So like for me, I wish I had a better answer for you. For me, this is my passion. This is what I love. And I'm not even that dude that writes every day. That's the crazy part. Like, but this is who I am. And so for me, it's just, I just keep pushing. When the trends change or whatever. And I've fallen for that with like I'm writing an LA crime, film, and people are like, nobody wants to do LA crime. And I stopped writing my LA crime film. And then I get mad at myself, 3 years later, I didn't like continue that. So just say, best way I could answer your question, and I hope what I'm answering is just like, continue to be focused, have goals, try to be organized, whatever works for you, and just keep pushing forward. Like I said, if you're doing work that you're passionate about, and you're not just trying to hit trends, it'll read through on the page. Because at the end of the day, like I said, they're hiring you, even if it's a rewrite. Most of the time, they're hiring you. And if you really want to be a significant player in this industry, that's the mentality you have to have: is that I'm the brand. Not the work isn't just the brand. I'm the brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially for a rewrite. I mean, that's such a big thing too, because they are hiring your voice specifically to make this thing work. It's such a big deal, and that's awesome. Congrats on landing that. We have another question from Candace. What are you seeing with the opportunities for limited run series?
What am I seeing? It seems like the opportunities are crazy right now. I don't know. I don't have specific experience with that. I mean, I think technically Penguin is a limited series that I'm working on right now, but in terms of my own work, one thing I am developing is a limited series. So it seems that right now, the limited series is the space for really evocative, smart, like mature, driven work. It feels like that's what the limit space. And I know, like, even talking to Julian, I think that's the move we want to. We keep trying to figure out what we're going to do next. And the one place I think we both keep coming back to, what we're both interested in, is limited series, because it's essentially like, it's great for us because, like, we can make another feature, but we can really do what we love to do, which is really drill down on character. So to give us, like, you gonna give us 5 episodes, versus you gonna give us 5 hours versus like 2, or an hour and a half. So we can really, and if you're a character person like I am, that gives you an opportunity to really drill down on that, especially if you're doing stuff that's kind of ensemble character work. So yeah, I feel like it feels like the limited series space is like, it's where it's happening right now. I know what I keep seeing all these billboards all over LA. A lot of it is limited series. I mean, I just started watching that Godfather limited series, the one about the offer, the one about the making of the Godfather. I literally started watching that last night. And you're seeing people like Miles Teller, a couple years ago, Miles Teller was like that dude. They were like, he's going to be the next one. You're attracting major talent, and you're still getting great resources financially and creatively to do pretty compelling work. So yeah, I think the limited series space is a good place. And if you have ideas that you feel, meet that, I think you definitely you should go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much, again, like you said, like in terms of character exploration, that is the playing field to be in. I just binged Dope Sick. Michael Keaton, I mean, this guy is a genius, and like just seeing that series, there's those episodes are just, it's layers and layers, and it's just so great. I mean, you could have done that as a feature, but it's just not going to hit the same. Nope. Well, it looks like we have maybe time for one more question if anyone wants to try to get something in there, but I'm just going to leave it at this for me. Advice for this group specifically, because I feel like a lot of them are kind of all over the world. I know we got one coming in from Australia. Those who didn't get the opportunity to go somewhere like AFI or live in LA, what is something you would just get, advise for them to do as a screenwriter, as a storyteller, trying to just get their foot in the door?
That's tough. It's not too tough. I would do what I did, which is in your city. Because before I came to LA, I was in Austin, and Austin is kind of a film hub as well. In your city, find the people that are making shit and connect with them. And especially if you have similar sensibilities, or maybe not, but they're making, find your tribe in your city. And the way you can do, like I said, the way you can kind of get around these kind of like traditional paths is to just go out and make stuff. I mean, you look at people like, obviously you look at like an Issa Rae, even though she did it in LA. I mean, the only advantage that LA gave her was probably access to like equipment and sunlight. I don't know. Like,
sunlight all the time.
Probably just sunlight. Cause like, I remember like watching her web series, Awkward Black Girl, back in the day. And I remember like the first episode, they showed the bloopers, and it was literally like, she just bought a 5D camera. She was driving in her car. She gave it to somebody. somebody was sitting in the passenger seat and she was like, she didn't know how to work. She was like, I think you press that button to turn it on. But she knew how to tell some interest. She had an interesting idea. She had an interesting perspective. She didn't know anything about actually producing an hour of television or 30 minutes of. She's like, I got an interesting idea. Take this camera. We're just gonna shoot me being awkward. You know what I mean? And it's gonna work. And it did. So like, you can do that in Austin. You can do that in Australia. You can do that in Minnesota. You can do that anywhere. Just find I'd say find your tribe. Find some people that you can build with and go out and make stuff. And it's like everything is. This generation is so lucky because everything is so like open now. Like you got Zooms, you got web. I mean, you got the web. I'm really dating myself talking about the web, but like you have so many like options to like really get your work out there to get it seen. Like I remember I did like this sketch back in the day with the group, and we just literally shot it, and it went viral on Funny or Die. I remember a buddy said he was like in Ibiza or something. He said he was hanging out and somebody was just like at the party. He was like, "Yo, man, you ever see this thing called Racist Siri? It's funny." He was like, "Yeah, man, we made that." You know what I mean? So like straight up, like you can do it. I know it sounds like way like it sounds basic, but yeah, you can literally go out and make stuff. Just find a group. And the reason I would say find a group is because guys can help each other. Because you have these down moments, you get tired, you don't want. The group keeps you going because you have like a few people that you're always in it together, and that way you kind of like hold each other accountable, for lack of a better word. So that's always my advice, especially when you don't live in LA, is just find that group, find that collective, and just start making stuff. And then when you do that, people will see it and they'll come to you.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the world now that it's opened up in terms of technology, there's that question, do I need to come to LA? Yeah, no. I mean, it really depends on what you're looking to do in your career. If you're just want to be a screenwriter and you could live back home in Quebec or something and just write and send in your script and then come to LA if you need to meet with a team. But I don't know, that's from my experience. But what about for you? Just like the necessity to be in LA. I know there was like a purge of people who kind of just left LA during the lockdown.
Up, yeah. You don't, weirdly now. First of all, yeah. I've been to Montreal. I'd much rather live in Montreal than LA. I mean, LA is great. I love LA. Yeah. Cool. We got beaches and sunlight. Well, but I've been to Montreal. I mean, it's cold other than that, but Montreal is beautiful. So like it's like, it is that whole like big fish in a small pond type thing. Like, that's a thing. So like, if you're good, like you're not, the thing about LA is we're all out here. We're all out here, really talented people, all trying to like kind of like get filtered through this small hole and get into the game, get into the industry. And by not being here, it gives you, yes, there's this argument, well, if you're not in LA and if you don't have a 310 area code, then you're not in it. You know what I mean? But at the same time, yes, you can, like, I've literally seen the last room I was in, which was The Chi on Showtime. 2 of the writers did not live in LA. One used to live in LA back when it was an in-person room and then went back to Chicago. The other one's never lived in LA. The whole time she was in Chicago and then she was in Atlanta. Like she kind of moved around a little bit. But like, this is a woman that was working, a very talented young woman, playwright, local Chicago playwright, talented, who was working on a major cable series that did not set foot in LA. So yes, especially with the Zoom thing now, it is 100% achievable. And what that talented young lady did was she was doing her thing. She found her tribe in the Chicago playwright community, in the Chicago activist community. And she was able to use that and exploit that to get her on a show, a major cable series. And she's still in Chicago doing her thing. So 100%, it is possible. And I know in Montreal it's a huge creative community. Find it, tap into it, do your thing. And you'll be surprised how that could propel you versus, coming to LA and getting into the grind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we're over time, but Shaye, thank you so much. This was a really fun conversation. I wish Jenna was here, but this was still fun. And I hope everyone really loved this. Let's see, Stephanie, thank you for a great discussion. Very inspiring. Keep writing, guys. We're all unique, but diverse and amazing stories. Yes, we are. Thanks to everyone in Script. You're very welcome. Looking forward to revisiting. Yes. And thanks for tuning in from Australia. Yeah. Everyone was great. Shaye, you're awesome. I can't wait to see your show about sneakers and the sneaker industry. I remember when I got my first compliment from you about my shoes, I was like, I'm in. I love this guy. And then just the fun tidbit about Shaye is that this guy is like, he knows every movie. He's just this storytelling monster. And I just remember in our AFI days, we'd watch movies and you'd always be the guy yelling at Michael Mann from the back of the room. To the point where there was a bingo game made out of it. So make sure you tune into what Shaye's doing. When you get a chance, when God's Country comes out on to the big screen, I encourage all of you guys to go check it out. It is a beautiful film. Keep supporting filmmakers, keep writing, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks, Shaye.